I want to welcome all of you to this next edition of CWR Academy and this webinar, Amplifying Justice, which is also a continuation of our annual conference. So I'm Robert Cogswell. I'm the Director of Communications for the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange and a member of the CWR's Education Committee. Oftentimes we'll start with a prayer, but as we're doing this as a continuation workshop from the conference, we wouldn't normally do that at a conference, so we're not doing that today. We're just going to jump into it. So as many of you are familiar, this is a webinar style, so you're viewing the speakers only. We invite you to ask questions throughout the time. You can do that by raising your hand or using the chat feature or the Q&A feature. And as we often have our panelists and presenters, they are willing to answer your questions. If we don't get to them today, you can simply follow up with an email. And this is being recorded, as we do with really almost all of our webinar material, except for Flash Conversations. We record it, and it'll be available later on the website. In case you need to duck out or you want to recapture something that was said, you can do that. So we'll get right to introductions, and I did want to just make a little connecting thought from our last webinar just a couple of days ago with Global Sisters Report, and really Gail DeGeorge brought this up, that sisters serving as justice promoters and answering questions about issues are current stories that they would want to cover. So that's a nice little connection between the two webinars this week. So without further ado, we'll get started by introducing our speakers. And full disclosure, I know both of these accomplished women. Maria Elena and I have been collaborating. We work for the same congregation. We've been collaborating for a number of years, and we've actually talked about doing something very similar to this, but Kristen beat me to it and organized it for our conference. So congratulations to her for beating me to the punch. And so Maria Elena is our justice coordinator with Sisters of St. Joseph Orange. She's the director of the St. Joseph Justice Center. And Kristen Whitney-Daniels is the associate director of the U.S. Federation of Sisters of St. Joseph, where she focuses on communications and justice. So I'm going to just give that brief introduction because they're going to introduce themselves a little bit more as well. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to my friend Maria Elena.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you for the opportunity to have us here today. It's truly an honor to be with you this morning. So I just wanted to share a bit about myself. I do want to say that it's been a pleasure to work with Rob. For 15 years, I've been working with the sisters, and he's been working for much, much longer. I truly enjoy the ministry I serve. I'm an immigrant, and I'm also an immigrant advocate. Collaborate with various groups locally and then at a national level on all types of social justice topics. And before that, I used to work in the Archdiocese in LA in the Justice Office for 16 years. So as you can see, I started when I was a very young kid. Yes, so that's a little bit about me. And so now I'll let Kristen introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Kristen Whitney-Daniels. As Rob said, I'm the Associate Director for the U.S. Federation of the Sisters of St. Joseph. I've been there for almost 4 years, and I was hired mainly to work on communications. But as time progressed, I also started shifting into justice work. In my mountains of free time, I also do healthcare advocacy, specifically with access to prescription drugs and insulin. I'm a type 1 diabetic and have been for almost 16 years. This has granted me a lot of really amazing opportunities, including getting to attend the State of the Union in 2020, the pre-times, with Connecticut Representative Rosa DeLauro, and was able to meet Representative Nancy Pelosi and a lot of other amazing people. through that, I've also been able to speak at my state capitol. My testimony's been included in the US Senate, and I just continue to advocate. As you can probably imagine, there's never a dearth of opportunities to advocate on healthcare. And one of my other unique positions that I've held was I was actually the 2016 to 2017 NCR Berlingske editorial internship and was a freelance reporter for a while. I specialized in criminal justice, specifically on capital punishment. And that was my beat for a really long time. And I'll throw it back to you, Maria Elena.
Thanks, Kristen. Impressive. So today, I was invited to share about collaboration between communicators and justice promoters. And as we know, communicators and justice promoters come from two different perspectives, ideologies, and experiences. All good, everything's good, all positive. But we have different perspectives on things. And so we realized that we can't do each other's jobs, but we can make it easier for each one as we support and complement each other's work and ministry. So I'm here to talk about what are some of the ways that we can do that. And for me, what's important is to get to know one another, get to know what is expected of each other. And in my experience, I'm always interested in what is Rob's approach as a communicator. What plan or perspective in addressing social justice is his perspective, and I mean, where is he coming from? But we sort of have an idea because we usually have regular conversations, and usually I'll come over and step over in my office. So I'll go over and have these late in the afternoon conversations, and so we get to know, in addition to exchanging about our work, about also on a personal level, about where our perspectives on certain issues and so forth, and that makes our work easier. So to say that when you know where the communicator and the justice promoter stand, it makes it way much easier to relate and to collaborate. And so you never know what type of ideas may surface from there, and also finding common ground. It's very important that this is how we can complement our work. So I can speak from experience that for me, it is helpful when I ask questions, and I ask a lot of questions of Rob, and he does the same. And so these are two tactics that we use. We realize he has a lot of deadlines and changing deadlines, and so do I. And so what are some of the upcoming events, including social media now? It's, of course, is front and center for all of us. What are some of the posting schedules that he has, and how can I maybe improve, contribute to that? So these are some of the projects he may be working on. So I find it helpful when we can work and share ideas about our workload and availability to work together. Both of us, the two of us, we can share about projects, upcoming events, upcoming deadlines, and so forth. So it helps to communicate and submit content. Rob's always asking me, well, I have this newsletter that is coming up. What is some of the content that you have? So it's always good to be able to be ready with that. As from the justice perspective, we tend to be involved in meetings and other stuff, but it's very, it's hard to keep in perspective what are some of the ways that we can work with communications to promote some of our work. So he makes it easier by telling me, so we have this deadline coming up. What are some of the things so that keeps it in front and center for me. So I think, let's see, you may want to go back one slide. Yeah, I think we're still there. Let me see. No, the one before that, sorry. Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so we know that justice promoters can be passionate about the work. I know I am, but I also have to be careful about being wordy. We think, at least I used to think that the more we say and the more we explain and share, the better the message will be across. That I've learned from Rob that the way to attract attention is less is better, less is more. That's hard to do, but I'm always challenged with that. So always trying to look to see how we can do that. I know that I've realized that that in working with Rob, the best way is, like I mentioned, to talk about things that are coming up and the demands, addressing the demands as they come up. And sometimes we have to shift our work around. So we make it a point to craft the message to whatever needs to happen. Another way that we can collaborate is by attending each other's events. A while back, I would say 4 years ago, we had a symposium, immigration symposium on our campus. And Rob attended, and he was there to document and videograph the event, take video and pictures. But also, he learned a lot about the immigration issue. So that helped us in working together in addressing future messaging on immigration, and of course, prayers and so forth. So we always make it a point to work with each other's events. And now I'm also a member of CWR. I just signed up, so I hope to learn much more and be able to interact more. So this is a good way to, again, collaborate. There's one specific instance or experience that we've had in collaborating is, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the 100 Days of Prayer. This has been a project that Communications and Justice in our congregation has been working on for the last 5 years. As a matter of fact, it started back in January of 2020. So throughout this time, between Rob, Elizabeth, and myself, we've been taking turns weekly to write these prayers. This has been a quite learning experience for the two of us, because sometimes it's challenging trying to address current issues while tending to our charism, and then finding ways to promote unity and staying away from divisive language. It's a bit hard, but we've been, we understand that from providing language that unites us as opposed to dividing us, this definitely takes us a long way. So this has been one way that we've been able to work together, and so it's been a great experience. So what we do is together we write, we design, and we publish the prayers, and we all within 35 words or less. So as you can imagine, we've got it down to the number of words. So it's been great. So at the end of the day, I think we are both helping one another share the message within the congregation and with the public, because of the way we collaborate and how we get to know one another, and how I see his approach. I've learned from the approach he takes, and so it's been very helpful. I think I would like to hand it over to, oh no, that's me too. Sorry, I thought it was Kristen. Thank you. So one of the ways that I've been approached by a number of sisters is, how do we get justice promoters, communicators, and elected leadership to work together? And that only makes sense, right? When making justice statements. Communicators And justice promoters do a lot of the work on the statements. For example, within our own congregation, we work on the statements, the language, and then we bring in the leadership. But the leadership has a lot to say as well. This is a good way to not only build relationship with your communicator, but also with the leadership. And there's also a sense that just like the communicators and the justice promoters get to meet regularly, maybe these meetings need to include also leadership. So we all know where we are, what we're working on, and how it's best to move forward or address specific issues that may be coming up or that are happening at that moment. Meeting regularly, it's a good suggestion. Rob and I meet regularly, but however, I think we need to work more with our leadership, because I think we meet with our leadership separately, but maybe the three of us could be a good way to do this. So I'm also learning from this. I know there's also opportunities to respond internally to issues that may be coming up. So that's another opportunity for our justice promoters, again, leadership and communicators, to work together. If there was a way that maybe an annual plan could be established that included regular meetings to brainstorm and plan, that would be a good way to start. That would be an opportunity to think ahead and be able to plan and make our work easier and better. Thank you. And Kristen, I pass it over to Kristen now.
So we promised we were going to talk about some actual sort of case studies that we've worked on together between me and Maria Elena. I sit at an interesting intersection because I'm not leadership, not elected, but I am a part of the leadership of the Federation, which encompasses 16 congregations in 4 provinces. So that's roughly like a little more than 3,000 sisters, and then probably close to 10,000 partners in mission altogether. So there's a lot of us that we're trying to include in these statements and our actions and our words. So for the Federation, we've come up with a process called corporate voice statements. If you don't have them in your own congregation, essentially we're trying to use our charism to translate essentially to our audience current event issues. And one of the major things that I've been working on since I've gotten here is making sure that we turn these words into action, so that it's not another statement added to a long list of statements that we have already put out. But our corporate voice statements also help guide us in terms of action. So if we have a corporate voice statement on a particular issue, we are also able to sign on to letters, and it's easier for us to do actions because this is something that we've agreed on. So right before I came in 2018, this process was set up. So essentially, we wanted to try to encompass all the voices of our communicators and justice folks. As you can imagine, we represent a very wide chasm of people. And so that's a lot of different voices that we have to try to find some middle ground for. So the way that we set it up is 12 months, each one of a congregation will be on essentially for that month. So if we get a statement from LCWR that comes out and we decide to also release a statement on it, it kind of triggers this statement process that we go through. And so, for example, Maria Elena and Rob will be on for 1 month, and they'll work together to make sure the statement has our charism language in it, as well as making sure that we have action items in social media. This, we've tried to do it in a 48-hour process because we know that responding to events is a very time-specific, emergent manner that doesn't always work with our individual schedules. So usually they come out on Friday afternoons at 3 p.m. Because that's the way that emergencies happen. But we try to give some understanding and space with the 48 hours. I think this does an excellent job because it gives each of our congregations a chance to show their language and also make sure that we're representing our justice promoters as well as our communicators, really finding that middle ground. I think one of our best examples of a corporate voice statement process was actually something that I got to work on with Maria Elena. Maria Elena is the head co-chair of our immigration working group, a part of our justice promoters. And so we knew that a DACA ruling was going to come out from the Supreme Court. So we preemptively prepared a statement and action alert. So whenever the ruling came down, we would be prepared. And it was our most successful one, because we already had our language ready and we knew this was an issue that would pop up. Some things we don't know, but you can usually count on a Supreme Court ruling coming out in roughly 9 months between their term. And so we were able to get it out, I think within 2 hours of them releasing it. And it had, it was a little bit of a surprise. We had to adjust it because we didn't think it would come out positively for DACA students or DACA holders. So we edited it just slightly, but we were able to get it out super quickly. It really increased our people's engagement. And I think communicators, I won't speak for you, Rob, but I think communicators really appreciated it coming out so immediately and with social media that we could promote. Maria Elena, do you want to talk a little bit about how you incorporate it into your congregation and tailor it to your congregational need?
Sure, Kristen. So what we do is, yes, once the statement is published by the Federation, then Rob and I get together to draft the content. And it's mostly, it's a lot of the wording that is used, the language, and then we'll include maybe a paragraph or two that includes our charism. Then what we'll do is we will, of course, like I said, tailor it and then share with the leadership. We engage the leadership to make sure that we're all on the same page and they all agree with the language that is said. But we also try to include actions within the statement because it's best to be able to, here's the issue, but then here are some of the things that can be done. So in drafting justice actions, it works best when we are both everyone's versed on social justice, the topic that is being addressed, and at the same time be able to create social media posts, and then from then on, however we need to distribute it or promote it. So that's usually how it works. And sometimes there's been a couple of times when we had statements on our own that we've drafted, depending on the issue, maybe it's a local issue and so forth. So we may do that as well. And that's how it usually is done.
Can I jump in just for a moment? We've got one question from our participants. Tammy Townsend-Denny asks where we might be able to see examples of those corporate voice statements if they're available somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. These are examples right here of some of the statements we've put out most recently, although I think the intersection between racism, migration, and climate change is a little bit older. But you can go to our website. I can drop the link because I have the PowerPoint up. I'm scared to go look for the link, but it's up on our website, which is cssjfed.org. And if you go to Justice and Peace, we have something that says corporate statements on there, and all of them are listed there from our older ones to our most recent. But I'll look for the link and drop that in as well.
It's in the chat already.
Thanks.
So, yeah. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa.
Lisa is our new justice promoter that we are absolutely delighted to work with. And just saying that this is also increasing our collaboration because our office is really small. We have an executive director, we had me, and then we had an administrative assistant. So adding Lisa in has really multiplied what we've been able to do. But we have been able to leverage our abilities because we have congregations that have given up their time and their abilities to make sure that things like the corporate voice statements are able to happen. So I just want to acknowledge that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about meeting people where they're at, because they both come from within and from the world. So I started off as a St. Joseph worker, which is a part of the Sisters of St. Joseph. It's a volunteer program that I did. And that was back in 2013. So I had never really encountered nuns before that. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of things I had to learn. There is definitely such thing as nun lingo and nun talk and Catholic lingo that I had to learn when I became a St. Joseph worker, and even more intensely when I picked up this position, and even before that, working with NCR and Global Sisters Report. So things like the word charism. Charism meant nothing to me as somebody who was raised Catholic, but wasn't really a part of that world. And so I really think when you're looking at your internal and external audiences, charism is a word that you can just say charism and you don't even have to explain what your charism is when you're doing internal communications. Like that is assumed. Our charism is care for the dear neighbor. Like we know when we're saying that it's the dear neighbor. But when you're doing external audiences, even some of your partners in mission might not exactly know what all of those words mean. And so I encourage people to always kind of have that hat on when you're thinking about the different audiences, especially if you're doing a press release. Like if you're doing a press release to the Washington Post, they're not going to know what charism is. They are not going to know the difference between a sister and a nun. I've had this fight so many times of like, we're not nuns, we're sisters. And like, but nun sounds better and people understand it better in the current vernacular. And so there's some battles that are worth correcting, and then some battles that you just kind of let them slide so that you can get the press you need. And I don't want to discourage people from using those words, because I think it's very important to our mission and to our identity, especially when we're able to do the internal work, but making sure that we explain it. So like if we say our charism, making sure that we put in parentheses or put in quotations, care for the dear neighbor without distinction. We're in a world that has so many different mediums that we can tell stories in. And I think that's so beautiful, but it also is very confusing because each one really comes with their own set of rules. So like posting on Facebook versus Twitter, you have word counts on Twitter, and then TikTok, you really want like a 45-second to a minute and a half video, where like on YouTube, you can do 5 minutes or longer, and Instagram and websites and blogging. So I think it really helps for me to define when I'm taking a story, when I have a story, I already have in mind exactly what mediums I want to tell that story in, and like having everything at your full disposal. So we recently got an Instagram when I got an intern. I told everybody I was not starting another social media program until I got help, and then I got help, so then I had to start an Instagram. Our intern was a St. Joseph worker who obviously was about 10 years younger than me, and she was like, we should start a TikTok. I would love to start a TikTok. However, I know within my capabilities, there is no way I'm going to be able to keep up with that. And also I'm going to run out of ideas of like what I can post on TikTok without doing like some weird dance once a week. That's not where I'm at. And I don't have the time for it. But I think there are I know some of the teams out there have people who can do social media, and TikTok is a powerful medium to tell a story, especially if you have some sisters, you're working at the congregational level, you have some sisters who are really fun and maybe are really interested in getting involved in it, and like promoting and giving them the experience and the tools to do that could be a really good way to like just show that more fun side of your congregation. And the one thing that I always like to press on is that when you are doing communications and justice work at that intersection, think about what you want to spur your people into action, whether that means you want people to donate, or you want people to learn more, or you need them to take action against a certain justice issue. Really think about that before you're doing your work, because that has always helped guide me in terms of where do I want to go with this piece. And it also helps with the medium. So like, not every story can be a Twitter post. You can post a link to your further information, and you could probably provide some context clues or statistics or something else in a Twitter thread, but that is not a good medium to tell a heartfelt story about somebody's trip to the southern border. Especially if you want people to take action. Now, sometimes there's really good poll quotes you could take that will catch the wind of people out there, but just really focus on what you want to accomplish. Sometimes I think we think about like, oh, we need this to go viral. We need to hit so many numbers. We need that, like, we need to get our engagement up. And I think, personally, I think that if you concentrate on your mission and what is most meaningful to you, the numbers will follow. I mean, there are just going to be times that things don't engage as much, and it can be a little heartbreaking because you put so much time and energy into it, but the right people will find it. Who is using TikTok successfully? So I'm not clearly using TikTok successfully. I'm not using TikTok at all. I'm not on there. I can't take another social media. Like, my brain just can't handle it. However, my intern loved sending me videos of other nuns who were doing it. Usually they're habited. And it just catches the attention because, as we know, sometimes people who are living differently, counterculturally, really catch the attention of folks. So sometimes if you have a really sassy thing to say about something, I've seen some of the younger sisters be able to use that as a tool, or sometimes just being fun about things, showing your way of life, particularly people, like I've seen cloistered folks use it, but also people who are less apostolic have been able to use it to kind of show like, oh, like a day in the life, which I'm sure we've all probably done in different mediums, but this is like short snippets. But if anybody else is using it really well, please drop something in the chat. I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah, would be interested as well. Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu reminds us that the longest journey a person must take is 18 inches from their head to their heart. And so this goes to say that in addressing social justice issues, of course, it helps to provide the information, but then how do you connect with people's hearts? What is it that you can do? So yeah, if we can just stay on that slide for a while. So justice promoters we always try to shorten this distance when addressing, for example, right now, the issue of immigration. Telling a story as we know, or having an impacted person share their testimony is definitely a good way to touch people's hearts. For example, we read about the injustices that DACA recipients may confront right now, and just trying to make their living, trying to get an education with no financial aid, no stability. Some of the DACA recipients also have jobs, but at the same time are going to school and supporting their families. This is definitely a very unjust issue. It's very unjust to children that have been brought here with no consent of their own, and now they find themselves struggling to move on and make a living. So it is. It's not just about, so people may read about it, as we know, on regular media and so forth, and so they may not be touched by it. But if you have a person that shares their story, as we know, then there's a different face to it. And now, for example, you hear of a person trying to make a living as a nanny and not getting enough wages and undocumented and so forth. So you may just disregard it. But if someone has a nanny who is undocumented. And so now that changes the story, right? So now the person's impacted. And so now the person's involved, and maybe it has touched their heart now. And so now they can move into action. And if the next slide, please. So this is where we try to see. Through our public witness, we try to be a prophetic voice, right? For years, for example, our congregation has hosted in-person public witness that allow us to be a presence and a voice for those that are marginalized. And it definitely creates an awareness and moves people to learn more and possibly into action. However, this sometimes does not allow to tell the personal story, like I mentioned. Personal story that makes the connection from the head to the heart, as we mentioned. So I'd like to share about what we did during the summer, what we've done for the past 2 years. So because of COVID, of course, we all had to reinvent ourselves to continue our ministry. I mean, we all have done that. We know there are disadvantages and of course advantages as well. So what we did is our public witness, in-person public witness, we turned it into a virtual public witness for 2020 and then this year, summer 2021. So for 3 months, we host a weekly prayer event for 30 minutes and we address a specific issue. Which can bring a personal story, a personal testimony. For example, DACA recipients, the essential workers, a non-housed person, the whole inequities that have been brought on by COVID, racism, and so forth. So what we did is we opened up with the prayer and we gave as much time as we could to the person sharing the story, 10 to 15 minutes. And then we provided some time for reflection, but we always close with an action because we figured the person now, whoever is watching, the participants have been touched by the person's powerful testimony. Now they're ready to act. And this has been we find this to be has been successful. And again, addressing this distance, 18 inches from the head to the heart. We know that there's much work to do, but this is what we've done. And I think even though hopefully COVID will be no longer and we can go back to in-person public witness again, but I think we'll continue the virtual witness because not only were we able to connect with local people, but also people across the US. More people watched our public witness this year than they did last year. And so there's a connection there. There's an opportunity for learning and then an opportunity to take action. So we always try to, we've been trying to do this, and it's a lot of work to put on this every week, but it's been great. And it gives us an opportunity for us to collaborate with our local folks as well. So this is how so we've been doing our public witness and how we were trying to make the connection between the head and the heart and draw people into action.
Just a real quick alert to folks who may or may not be following the chat. There was some mention of TikTok earlier, and Dusty referenced a great webinar that she encountered from UISG about religious using TikTok, and Brian dropped in a link into that about that in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks. So and now Kristen, I hand it over to you now.
So I'm really excited because I love talking about storytelling. Like, this is my jam. It really is the intersection of communications and justice for me. And it's been something I've worked really hard on for the last couple of years, both in my work at the Federation and also my advocacy work. Really, I've worked on, I've hosted a couple story lab trainings in order to really hone people's skills of not only being able to communicate their story so that the communicators know how to tell the story, but also for the people who want to tell their stories, that they can hone those skills and really figure out the best way to communicate and show that it's not so terribly scary to do that. I think it's really important to know that everyone has a story. It sometimes just requires the right questions. And I think we all know there's a sister out there who has a really compelling and really interesting history who just doesn't really talk about it. And you're like, oh gosh, I would love if she would just share this story. And I think sometimes one that requires building up relationship, people have to trust you in order to tell your story, especially if it comes from like a more traumatic background. But also, sometimes people just don't ask the right questions. Sometimes people are really scared to ask questions like, hey, I just really want to hear your story, like off the record. We don't need to publish this, or maybe we can later. But people need to feel supported and that you're personally interested in their story for whatever reason. Justice folks are really responsible for staying updated on the current issues. And sometimes I know with communications, I'm always thinking of the next issue, the next thing I need to do, the next publication that needs to come out. And so sometimes storytelling really is the antithesis of active communications, because it really does take the time to hone our interview skills and build that relationship in order to sometimes get that going. Like that's going to take a little bit of planning out. Like that might be 3 issues from now to get that story out. I also feel really strongly, and this is something we've tried to work really hard at with the Federation, is that when we're talking about stories, we try to center first person narratives. So that means that not all, like, we're not asking people who visited the centers what their story, like, what did they see? But it's like getting the story at the center of the issue. I don't believe in that narrative anymore of like being a voice for the voiceless. Everybody has a voice. It's just whether they have the opportunity to share it, the resources to share it. I sometimes get frustrated as a person with diabetes because sometimes a lot of people like to tell our stories, doctors, people in other organizations, and they like to say like how difficult it is. And I'm like, it would be really a lot easier. And I'm my own expert on my own experience for you to actually ask me about my story. It takes more time. Sometimes you can't always find the person that you need to say that story, but I think it's really important, and it kind of can shift kind of that like white savior moments that we sometimes have of like telling other people's stories for them. I think there's a real shift, and I've seen some conversations on the CWR Discord about no white saviors and sharing other people's stories. And I'm really invested in learning more about that and making sure the disenfranchised have that opportunity. Again, coming back to that safe and supportive environments. You had the conversation with Gail on Tuesday, and I think that's a really interesting timing with the storytelling, because her conversation happened on Tuesday. I'm sure she gave you a lot of really good ideas and resources on how to pitch a story. So I'm only going to touch on this briefly, but you need to know why it's important to you and to your audience before you tell the story. And when you're pitching stories, so like I used to get a ton of press releases and it'd be like, it's our 100th anniversary. And you're like, okay, but like, we need like contextualize that for me. Like, why is this important to everybody nationally? So like 100-year anniversary might be really good for a local newspaper because that's something that's very community oriented. But like, if you want to pitch to a national publication like Global Sisters Report or NCR, what's the national context? Do you know other congregations who are doing that same work? Because that, oh my gosh, if you connected me to other sisters who are doing the same work and it's really important and it's becoming a trend, oh, I would love you. Like that was always ideal for me, because then I can turn that into a story. It's not just one one person doing this one extraordinary thing, then it becomes a trend that these sisters are on the cutting edge and are, you know, I did a story on the 1980s where sisters were going down to the southern border and helping asylum seekers, particularly from Guatemala, come over the border illegally, and getting them into the country and giving them asylum and giving them a sanctuary space. That was a trend that was happening that I was able to report on in context with what was happening in 2016, 2017. So knowing why it's important to you, knowing why it's compelling, and knowing why it's timely is really great for if you're pitching the story. And then I put this in bold, and I already talked about this, but always end with a call to action. And no matter what story you're telling, there's a reason why somebody is telling the story. It's usually coming from either a place of fear or frustration, especially if it's tied with a justice issue. Could be tied to legislation that's currently happening or legislation that's not happening, and people are aren't seeing it happen. If you don't have a call to action at the end of your story, you are leaving people hopeless that this is a tragic story that happened and there is nothing we can do about it, and people leave sad and depressed. But I firmly believe that we all have some sort of power within us to do something, whether that means we share that story with one person you heard today. I think that's something that Maria Elena has done in the public witnesses. People won't sit there and figure out, most people will not sit there and figure out how to make a difference after you tell them the story. Like, just make it easy on them and pick one call to action. Be very clear on it. That is also really important. You know, usually pick one call to action, two calls to action, so that people can clearly seek out what they can do next. And the call to action, days of action, a really good segue. And this is just, we're going to talk about like one more practical use and intersection of justice and communications, much like Maria Elena's public witness. So in 2019, LCWR, along with Network and a bunch of other organizations, participated in the Catholic Days of Action around immigration issues. These are all pictures I took at the Capitol. I was able to go down. It was a sweltering day in DC in the middle of July, but it was incredibly empowering. Before I went in, I didn't quite understand the purpose of getting arrested for something. And then I got there and I realized that this created such a huge uproar. There's nothing like a headline that says 90-year-old arrested at the state capitol to get people and spur people to action, to figure out what is going on. You know, these people wanted to be arrested. They came in saying, we are going to be arrested. But that headline, people were enraged that a 90-year-old would be arrested and in zip ties. And so I really understood the power of direct action that day and what kind of stories that can tell. They did feature people's stories, first-person stories at that event and in the subsequent event that happened in Newark that I was also at. And one of the really interesting interactions is that I will show our social media pages. These were by far the most viewed, most liked, most shared posts that we have ever had on our Federation website. That video that I had on the left corner, I personally narrated. I've never done that before. I don't know what compelled me, but it was kind of hard to see what was exactly going on. And so we were commenting back and forth to people. It was shared a lot. You can see that there was over 2,000 views of it. I posted a picture of myself and one of my friends who had gone down for the day of action holding posters, and ABC News contacted us on Twitter to use our photo. So we ended up in ABC News after. And then down at the bottom is another Facebook Live event that we were able to do at Newark as some of our sisters were getting arrested. I put getting arrested in quotes because they refused to arrest people, which created a standoff in downtown Newark, which was fun in its own right. But this was probably one of the most empowering intersections of direct action and justice and communications working in a compelling way that we were able to really create a lot of awareness around it. Numbers are not the end all be all. I just want to like say that, like, even if you only have 5 people come to a press conference or something like that, is still important that you're getting the word out. But we really do have stories to tell, and people are listening. People want to hear this. People want to know that our sisters, our people are at the front lines and working on these justice issues. So I'm going to end it here. I'm going to leave room for questions and answers. I put Maria Elena and my email up there. You can contact both of us at any time. We are happy to answer questions. I'm on the Discord. I'm regularly lurking on there. So also happy to do stuff on there too. So I'm never too far away.
Thank you, Kristen. Yes, that's interesting mentioning the Discord, because I've seen a few notifications popping up. It's almost like we're live streaming the webinar through Discord or something. So thanks for, anyway, just something else to watch while we're doing these webinars. I do have a couple of questions for you, but there might be some from our participants, so feel free to raise your hand or drop something in the Q&A. One thing I did want to mention is, and thank you, Maria Elena, for addressing how we've worked together. And there's a lot of reasons why that's been successful, but I think one of them is really just kind of simple. It's location, location, location. We've had our offices like right next door to each other, so it's made it easy to just darken each other's doorways, or just shout out from your desk, "Hey, Maria Elena, what do you think about whatever it is?" And that was so successful for us that, I mean, we've all moved around in our buildings, gone to different office locations due to the needs of the congregation. But it became a point like, hey, communications and justice really need to be in close proximity to each other. We shouldn't be in different buildings. So right now we're a little further apart, but it's still only probably 50 steps or something to go see one another. So that simple aspect of location is really helpful just for the collaboration side of it. So that's my editorial, but a question I'd like to ask is, if justice and communications are not currently collaborating, maybe you have a rogue sister or someone's really siloed or something, what is a good startup project to kind of get that collaboration going?
I could say take them out to lunch. I believe that personal relationships are at the core of finding a good working relationship, and find out how the person thinks, where they stand on certain issues, and what are some of the commonalities between the two, because then everything develops from there. Then you develop this trust and confidence and opportunities to say, hey, what do you think about this? Or did you see the news last night? And so that kind of creates an opportunity for ongoing dialogue, not only on current events or things that may be going, but things that may come up in the down the line, and also planning, because I know for us, I know for Rob is, the planning. I know he's overwhelmed, and so am I. He's losing a person, and I lost my assistant coordinator also. So we're almost on the same boat. But when there's so much going on, you kind of have to prioritize. And one way to do that is by knowing where the other person is and where the other person stands and what the plans are.
Thank you. I don't know, Kristen, if you want to add to that at all, you can, but there's another question that Siobhan has asked. So I'll jump into that in a moment if you want to add anything. Or
I think Maria Elena has a really good grab on that. Obviously, I'm coming from a little bit different of a scenario. All of us are virtual. We all work remotely. And just key to us has been scheduling regular meetings and quarterly meetings with all the communicators across the Federation. So we're on the same page.
All right. Thank you. For our participants who maybe can't see the Q&A, Siobhan asks that their social justice promoter, she's 90 and she's got lots of heart and energy, that of a 50-year-old with exclamation points. So hooray for that. However, there are some limitations. So what are your thoughts on how we can collaborate and be timely with sisters who are aging?
I really subscribe that there's a continuum of actions and engagement that any person can make. Obviously, there's physical limitations to some of that. And so really thinking about, we really try to think about like, what can our sisters who are in our mother houses, who are bound to the mother house, what can we do to engage them and make sure that they feel like they're a part of it? So maybe she's really good at maybe like organizing a live stream of what's happening nationally. So we were able to do live streams of stuff that's happening at the events, making sure that the mother houses were all responsible or a part of it. And maybe she's really good at making prayers for those groups and making sure that they have, we call it state of the heart, but like questions that they can answer and engage with in prayer. There's always going to be people who can put their bodies on the line, and then people who can't in any continuum of like direct action, and just really honoring that the continuum. Maria Elena, do you have anything else to add?
That's been a question that specifically in our social justice committee we've been addressing. We have a lot of sisters that are eager, and so how do we keep them involved? And one way we've done that is through advocacy. We created a roster for their legislators, local and national, statewide. And so we say, call this legislator and urge them to vote on this. So making phone calls, writing letters, sending emails, and just giving them all the information so it's practical for them, like a series of steps. This is what you can do, because we realized they may not be able to go out and do public witness or things like that, but definitely from their own place where they are, they can definitely be involved in advocacy. Especially now, we've been scheduling virtual meetings with our legislators, and we've been inviting sisters to attend, and they are more than happy to do that. So that's been working for us. Bringing sisters to meetings, virtual meetings with their local representatives has been great.
Siobhan, one other thing, that some of those public witness pictures that you saw, what you're not seeing in some of those is there's also like a seating area for our older sisters. So, around the corner from those standing and waving their signs, there's also a group of older sisters who are seated there holding their own signs and active with the event too. So
thanks for bringing that up. Yes.
Yeah. All right, we're close to the top of the hour. So just a last call for any other questions out there, any raised hands or anything. Okay. All right, well, I'd like to thank both of you, Kristen and Maria Elena, for joining us today. And if we didn't quite get to any questions that are out there, as we said, you can certainly email them. Both our CWR members. As is tradition, we will have a survey that follows, and our recording today will be available on the CWR website. We have another post-conference session next week on Tuesday, December 7th with Sister Charlene Hendricks and Carol Scheck-Schreiber from NRVC on data you need to know for your vocation communications. So that's next week, as well as our CWR award recipients. You'll get to hear about their projects that were recognized at the annual conference. So thank you. As Maria Elena mentioned, she jumped into the new member initiative. So keep sharing the word about that and invite colleagues to join CWR with this great opportunity that we have. And remember to jump onto Discord and see all the conversations that are happening there too. So thank you all, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.